This is Brittany from BLG Creations with my geode tutorial. Start with a soda ash soaked shirt, then let it dry completely. I then took a washable marker and drew on roughly where I want my geodes to go on the shirt. I draw the center and then usually at least a few lines and then how big I want that specific geode. And then I try and just pull up the fabric with it, which you'll see. I use artificial sinew to tie up geodes. That's tied with a slip knot. You're going to want to grab the fabric. You want to draw the geodes on both sides. You don't do a double thickness. You just do one side and one geode at a time. So you put your slip knot on the top of a geode, pull it fairly tight, and then wrap it around. I do 2 or 3 times. Then I use my puller, which is I actually think it is like a noodle tamper for like pasta. Wrap around and pull it nice and tight. Now you're going to want to grab the fabric and push it kind of up. Grab it from below and kind of push it up. And I usually try and match up the line at least just a little bit. Does not have to be perfect. I also like to cut off that little string just so it doesn't get in my way. Wrap it around 2 or 3, 4 times, whatever. Pull it tight. Move on to the next one. And in the spots where I don't leave like a draw line, I just kind of scrunch it up, however, just really randomly scrunch the shirt up. Make sure it's all, flat and loose and not connected to the other side. And you just grab it. And when you're tying these, I try extra hard to keep the fabric really flat, not let it get round. So when I'm doing this, I'll bring that piece of fabric up, wrap the sinew around it, and then when I tighten it, or when I'm ready to pull it, I squeeze it kind of with my thumbs and my fingers, and I hold it nice and flat so that it doesn't get rounded. And then I'll grab it with my hand and pull tight. And then you just keep going down. I like to make my geode lines different distances apart, as well as pulling up, scrunches of material and whatever on there. Changing up the distance between them can just add a little more uniqueness to it, make it look more like a rock. You can see that it's getting a little thick down here, but I'm keeping them all the same width, I guess, the same thickness. Even though it's a lot of material, it's just getting, wider and wider flat-wise, not thickness-wise. So I'll just kind of smash it even more flat and make sure that they're all kind of the same. I'm working on the sleeve next, and this time I decided to just kind of fold it up in there and just tie randomly. Sometimes, as you'll see on the other sleeve, there is an actual geode on the sleeve. Now here I'm going to do a spot that has 2 geodes for the center, not just a single one. I'm going to move them down just a little bit probably. I think I just moved one over. Sometimes I cut my sinew in between geodes and other times it's easier to keep it attached. This time I decided to cut it and then I tie a new slip knot, which I didn't show you in the beginning, but it's really easy to do. So for doing 2 geodes in the center, you start with 1 and pick it up from the center, wrap it around and tighten it just like normal, but only go down, you know, as many as you want in that little spot. I think I'm going to do 3 or 4 little sections here, and then you'll move on to the second one. I only just cut off the very end piece because it gets in the way when I'm tying. And I'm doing the same on these as I did on the other geode node, I think they're called. You know, you just kind of scrunch up pieces of fabric and make it to where it won't be a circle. If you just pinch the fabric and pull it up and don't do anything else and just tie it around, they're going to be completely round. So you have to pinch it, pull it up, and then grab little tucks of the fabric and pull them up a little bit and put those into that fold, into that tie. So I have the 4 done there, and now what I'm going to do the second one is grab it kind of where I want the center one to be, and instead of starting from the top, you're going to take that same piece without cutting it and wrap it around from the bottom of where, you know, the bottom one of the second center of this geode is going to be. Try and get it as close to the first one as you can. That's what I do. From there, you're going to take the sinew and go up this geode piece. And I just take pieces from the top and kind of pull them down. Instead of pulling from the bottom up, you just do it opposite. This one's all squished up already. I didn't need to do much more to it. It looked good to me. So I did 4 on one side, and I think I'm going to do another 4 on this side too. Okay, so now you just take that piece of sinew and loosely, lightly wrap it down the one node that you were just working on. And now you're going to make the rest of this one. So you just kind of bunch the fabric underneath and wrap around and tighten it like normal. And then just keep going with grabbing the little pieces. It's important at this stage, especially now that I'm doing the piece, a base piece of this geode that's going to come close to the center. You want them all to be laying flat and not sticking up straight, you know, like a tree, like straight up. You want them all to lay flat to the ground. You can see when I hold that up, they're both facing the same direction. They don't have to face the same direction. They just need to be laying flat. And you have to remember to keep squeezing them and not let them get round. You want them to stay super flat that way, like this, and flat without them, the whole thing like poking up. I'm going to speed up the video here in a minute because you just keep going all the way around the shirt. You can see there's a geode on that sleeve. So I think I do that one next. And I cut my sinew. I'm gonna start from the center, and I'm making sure that all my other geodes are like, you know, ready and not getting bunched up with what I'm doing right now. See how I grabbed some fabric and I'm pulling it up? Now I'm gonna wrap that around. I don't always start at the center. Sometimes I start at the bottom. It's just whatever I feel is gonna make it look better and lay flatter, because I want it to be as flat as possible so that it's easy to put dye on every single piece and it's easy to put ice on every single piece. And now the geode is pretty much tied up as a flat little creature. So this is the setup I use. That's just a basket from Five Below, and then I think that's like a paper basket. I use a pan on the bottom while I'm placing dye to catch all my extra, and I keep it in a jar on its own. It's a really cool color that has really cool splits. Okay, so here's our tied up geode. You can see that it's nice and flat. Everything's laying the same direction. Nothing is super round. Dye is going to lay nice and easy on those. I use these little pieces of tin foil to hold up pieces of the geode and fill in the space so that I don't waste a bunch of ice to fall through the basket at the bottom. So I just tuck little pieces in and around the geodes. I lined my basket with tin foil, obviously, as well. So here's the geode in the basket, ready for some dye. You gotta make sure that you get, you know, all the little pieces that are underneath some of these arms of the geode. I used 3 colors on this geode. Sea Green from Grateful Dyes, Aster from Procion Dye, and Stormageddon from Dharma. I just use a little teaspoon scoop. Sometimes use a smaller scoop to get the dye into smaller areas or underneath some of the arms of the geode. And I just put it on randomly wherever I feel like it. I don't start with this particular color for any reason, just because. You can start with whatever color you want. I don't know exactly how much dye I use per shirt. I just kind of sprinkle it on there, and I got a little bit of the sea green in a place I didn't really want it, but it doesn't really matter. I'll just cover it up with another color. That's the color Stormageddon going on now. And there's Aster. All the colors on. Now I'm going to place ice. I actually opened a new bag of ice during this video, so I have 2 different types of ice going on this shirt. But I just buy the bagged grocery ice, you know, from the gas station. When I place the first pieces down, I try to kind of set them on there fairly nicely, make sure they all get a nice piece of ice. Every piece of the dye gets a nice piece of ice on it. And you have to remember to place ice on those geodes underneath as well, because you have the arms that sometimes are underneath other arms. I try when I'm tying to not make them overlap, but it does happen. After I place the first layer of ice, I use a bigger scoop and just start pouring it on. I use a heat gun to melt my ice because I'm impatient, and I forgot to sprinkle. I like to sprinkle just a little soda ash on top just because, probably unnecessary, but it's just what I like to do. That's my kitty in the background you see there. Her name is Lily. The ice is melted a bit here. This is how I do it. I keep the heat gun pretty close to the ice and just keep going around and around, heating each area evenly until it all melts. Takes some time, but not too much. That's after the first layer of dye or of ice. I added a little more, and then it looked like that. So now I'm going to take water that I've heated to 155 to 160 degrees. And I just used my electric tea kettle, used a thermometer in it, and stopped it when it was at the temperature I wanted. Pour it all over the geodes, wet every single piece. Pour it fairly slowly, but not super slow either. Once I'm done doing that, I bring the shirt into the house and rinse it with the hottest water that my shower can get to. I make sure to rinse off all of the tin foil too, that way I can reuse it. But you just keep rinsing and rinsing. You can see in the background how colorful the water is. Now it's a little more clear. I've turned the water cold now, and I'm squeezing out the last remainder of dye that I can. Okay, I'm done rinsing. Now it's time for the fun part, which is the reveal, the untying. You just grab one of your loose sinew strings and pull a little bit, and it starts to unravel. Once you've completely untied the geode, it will need to be rinsed again. I don't bother with hot water again. I just use the cold water and rinse until mostly clear. You can see how much excess dye is still coming out. Here's the shirt, just rinsed, not washed yet, rinsed and just hand wrung. You can already see quite a bit of the color. It looks dark, but don't be scared because you have to wait until it's washed and dry and ironed. That's when you'll know what it really looks like. And here's the finished shirt.